actually just that basic. You know, for an audience like this, I think it's just that basic.
I agree. It's so many layers to it.
So I
And I
think,
think precisely for the reasons you say, basically if you really want to do the right thing.
What's happened is,
I think you're right, but then for me, when I think of like my bisexual friends, like, I think to like mush it together, it's to like they're not being represented. So it's a real, it's a tough one.
And I know it's quite a conversation within the community. We're glad.
One of our recent board meetings, the first half hour was like, what do we call it? Because like, you know,
That was fantastic. Really nice personal interview.
Rich is right here.
Oh, okay. Rich is that way. Hey, Rich. Most people say I'm sort of loud enough. But in the case I'm not. I'm only with you really just as for some introductory remarks. Unfortunately, WEF got to me first. And I have to be somewhere else on something else. But for me, doing something for LGBT at Davos is amongst the most important things in my year. Do I think that we're going to have a revolution as a result? No. But getting our faces in their faces is what's crucial. Because this is an environment where we can start the agenda. We can start the talk. Because, let's be blunt, those of us who come here understand the language that they speak. We're not threatening. Well, not always. We can get the access that's necessary. You know, I don't like it. It's not nice to say that that's why, you know, that's our great goal, but by coming to Davos, by having a seat at the table, peripherally or centrally, that can make a difference. I'm going to be brief because we have more important people to hear from. And the first thing I just want to say, this is about allies. So I looked up the definition of allies. Supporters, friends, those who are with you. And then I thought about Ukraine, and we talk about allies. Who's the allies of Zelensky? Who's the allies of this? And then I started thinking about our agenda, the LGBTQI agenda. Allies. And this is where Davos is important, and this is where your discussion today is important, because we have to push it further than just friends. It's not enough. This is the one place where you can say, well, that's very nice, but it's not enough. A pride flag once a year is not enough. HR policies that recognize inclusion is not enough. And for big companies who are well familiar with what we're talking about, and they know exactly what we're talking about, you're now saying, all right, what are you going to do on big political issues? And you just watch the white of their eyes as they head to the door. But if, as seems likely, the leading candidate in the United States for the Republican, the battle that'll take place, is somebody who promulgated a Don't Say Gay and then beat up on corporations in the process, it's not enough just to fly a rainbow flag. Why do I care about this particularly? Because you have plenty of experts on this in terms of US domestic. Because when it comes to international, what America does will be the fig leaf that covers for other countries. Well, we're only following America, the great democracy, the mother of etc. I mean, constitution that goes back several hundred years. If it's good enough for America, it's good enough for my dictatorship. And that's how it goes. Don't make it. I've had it in my face. And so that's why next year, I would like to see invitations sent to the Polish House, to NEOM, to the Emirati Pavilion. In fact, I will pay for the flag that you deliver to them to display. That's what being an ally is about. Getting people to stand up for you in public and private and make the... I've gone on long enough, you know all this. I do need to introduce Sarah Kate and just simply say, if there's ever a person who will lead this cause to the next level and beyond, because she speaks the language, don't underestimate that. Sarah Kate, you'll excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I have to go and improve the state of the world.
Thank you, Rich. Should I take that mic? I just want to say, Richard, your coverage on CNN changes the world, especially for LGBTQI people. So thank you for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Kate Ellis. I'm the president and CEO of GLAAD. I need glasses now. So bear with me. Apologies for that. And Richard's right. Last night we saw a rainbow rave on the promenade. 15 companies. Is this on? Is it working? It is, okay. And organizations lighting their venues up in rainbow. We worked with Accenture on this and the Partnership for Global LGBTQ Equality, which is called PGLE, to organize this historic show of support. The great mind who introduced this idea and worked with GLAAD to organize was Beck Bailey, who is Accenture's Global Chief Diversity Officer and an executive co-chair of PGLE. PGLE, just so you know, is a project of the WEF. And if you're a business leader here, please join us at the PGLE. We need more allies in PGLE. So what's next after a rainbow promenade? I mean, that was a big deal, I want you to know. It was historic. Our conversation today will focus on public corporate allyship for the community, keeping that rainbow allyship up year-round. That's critical. A lot of people have said the information in Davos this week has been bleak, but one piece of brightness for me has been the high number of discussions around corporate and civil society collaboration. This has moved so significantly from when I started at GLAAD 9 years ago. You'll see it right here. I want to thank our partners for this affiliate session: Accenture, Edelman, Open for Business, and PGLE. GLAAD is part, as I said, of PGLE, which is a project of BSR and the UN Commission on Human Rights and WEF. Together, we work year-round to find pathways for global business to address the most pressing issues for the LGBTQI community. PGLE actually launched here in Davos in 2019. One of the successes and visions has been to help its member companies operationalize the UN standards of conduct for business in tackling discrimination against LGBTQI folks. Today's conversation is rooted in the fifth and final pillar of that document entitled Acting in the Public Sphere. It's about business using its power and platform in public and private to drive change. It's what GLAAD does as an organization. We advocate for public actions. Those actions can take many shapes. My team in the GLAAD Media Institute advocates for the actions, and we are also a resource to work behind the scenes or as a public partner with companies that want to engage publicly. Before we talk about what it means to be a corporate ally, we have to discuss why. Why corporate allyship is so important to our community. And it starts with the reality of what we as a community are facing right now. Take a look. This is the world we live in every day. These headlines show how political leaders and right-wing activists are playing politics with our lives, and it's leading to violence. In November, GLAAD was immediately on the ground in Colorado Springs after the horrific shooting in Club Q to help the bar owners, survivors, and families deal with this crisis. I was terrified, as so many were, and devastated when the Club Q news broke. But really, sadly, I was not surprised. We saw this coming. We've been saying this is what the rhetoric will lead to violence and death in our community. Because these headlines are just a smattering of what we've experienced this year, the rhetoric and the legislation that leads to violence, global business and civil society need to join together to combat this. Our power is in being together to move this forward. Here are some facts that frame a backdrop of the headlines you see behind me. Last year, GLAAD reported an alarming 70% of LGBTQ people in America experienced discrimination. That's up 24% from 2020. There were over 300 anti-LGBTQ bills last year, And just 18 days into this new year, 18 days into January, the US has seen over 100 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in states around the country. That's more than 5 a day, folks. Most of these target transgender youth and LGBTQ inclusion in schools. Our own GLAAD research also shows that over half, that's 54% of transgender and non-binary people feel unsafe and unwelcome walking in their own neighborhoods, in their homes, in their towns. It's unacceptable. And more than 2 out of 3 transgender and non-binary people are more fearful for their personal safety this year than in the last 2 years. Excuse me. It's hard. It's hard having good hair. No. Just kidding. And this is a global reality for far too many LGBTQ people. This is not isolated to the US. In other developed countries, including the UK and Italy, there is a similar fear and targeting. In the UK, there has been a massive rise in anti-LGBTQ hate, especially anti-trans. 2 days ago, the UK government blocked a Scottish law that would make it easier for transgender people to transition. Transitioning and medical intervention for trans people saves lives. It's life-saving medical care. The UK dropped 11 percentage points in the ILGA annual ranking of European countries on LGBTQ safety. Italy just elected a prime minister with a history of anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, and is the only major country in the Western Europe that has not legalized marriage equality. Come on, like, this is too long now. And in nearly 70 countries worldwide, it is still a crime to be gay. It's still a crime. Our community is unsafe in America and worldwide. We need advocates, we need safe havens. As the Edelman Trust Barometer found again this year, businesses are the most trusted institution. When you speak out, the world listens and it internalizes it more than government and any other cultural institution. So we need businesses to publicly support and show up for us. Last week, the 2023 DEI Lighthouse Report from the WEF Global Parity Alliance was released. I was honored to be a part of this committee to choose 8 lighthouses, meaning businesses that are safe havens for diverse communities. The headline of the WEF report is that by designing organizations that not only are inclusive, but also leverage their global footprint to shape the broader ecosystem, business leaders have the opportunity to shape societies that are equitable for all. Let that sink in for a second. WEF is stating that business, DEI, shapes society. DEI cannot be an HR function. It needs to report directly to CEOs. GLAAD partnered with Edelman Trust Institute for some key insights around business and LGBTQ rights in the US. This important piece of research unveiled new data that showed a majority of Americans support companies and CEOs speaking out on LGBTQ rights. These new stats, US-based, they are US-based, but Edelman's findings from around the world show similar numbers. So this is not just US-based phenomenon. Nearly 60% of adults agree that if businesses devote significant resources to protecting the rights of LGBTQ people, it could have a positive impact, 60%. And over half expect CEOs to inform and shape conversations and policy debates about LGBTQ rights. It's not even that they want to see it, it's they expect to see it. That's the change that's happening, and it's happening in real time. On the flip side, silence, which a lot of companies are talking about this week. They're changing the ESG, the S from social to silent. Silence on important issues has a direct impact on the bottom line for consumers. 1 in 3 adults say they will stop. They will stop using products from a company if they stay silent on issues that are important to them. And this grows to over half among Gen Z. Talking a lot about Gen Z this week, right? And where they're going. 20% of Gen Z reports being LGBTQ in the latest Gallup poll, and that number doubles in other research. So fighting for LGBTQ people is in the fabric of Gen Z's DNA. It's how they live, it's how they breathe. It's expected, as we said. I think expected is an important word for today. Consumers, and particularly young consumers, expect businesses to do more than just sell products and services. They expect brands to be allies and to use their power and influence towards acceptance of the LGBTQ community. The impact to the bottom line is significant. Edelman's research shows that those 18 to 34 years old are nearly 2 times more likely than all adults to say businesses should allocate money and resources to prioritize LGBTQ rights. Not only do younger people believe LGBTQ issues should be a top priority for brands, they are more likely to want to work for and buy from brands that show this support publicly. Those companies that are going to weather this economic storm are the ones that continue to prioritize DEI. So do not put it to the bottom of the list and cut it out because we're facing tough times. Those companies, there is a huge opportunity for brands today to not only do what's good for the world, but also good for business, especially amid the global talent war. According to the GLAAD and Edelman Trust Institute research, 18 to 34-year-olds are, listen to this, 5.5 times more likely to want to work for a company that publicly demonstrates support for the LGBTQ community, and 2 times more likely to want to buy products and services from brands that publicly support us. Here's what I'd like you to take away from this presentation. LGBTQ people too often face discriminations and threats to safety. Consumers believe your role in global business is to inform conversation and to expand and protect our rights. Public advocacy builds loyalty everywhere. They want to work for and buy from brands who support us. The challenge has been given to you now, and what will you do? Thank you again, and I look forward to a spirited conversation that will make a difference here in this room. Here, I'd like to introduce our moderator, the one, the only, Ryan Heath from POLITICO.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah Kate. We've had the pep talk from Richard. We've got the data from you, Sarah Kate. It's now time to talk through with our wonderful panelists the practice of allyship. My name's Ryan Heath, as Sarah Kate said. I write the Davos playbook for Politico, and I've been coming here for 10 years, but it's the first time I've stood in front of one of these logos doing a panel. And it's taken too long to get here, but it's a very welcome change now that we are here. I'm working on making this sweater the staff uniform next year. So please write in with your support for that campaign. Now, to save us a little bit of time, I might do the introductions of the panelists as I welcome them to the stage. First, Justin Blake from Edelman. He is the director of Edelman's Trust Institute, and you lead executive positioning worldwide for Edelman. So come on up, Justin. Then we have Jay Brown, who's Senior Vice President of Programs, Research, and Training at the Human Rights Campaign. Come on up, Jay. We've already got Sarah Kate up here. Next is KAVITHA PRABHAKAR, who is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Deloitte. And last but not least, NADJIA YOUSIF, who is Managing Director and Partner and Chief Diversity Officer at Boston Consulting Group. Come on up. Now, this is where we pretend that we had this better organized. This is your mic, Nadia.
There's one here.
Oh, I've got a mic here, so all good. Let's get into these questions. I want to start with you, Sarah Kate and Justin. We know from the Edelman data that more than half of adults want corporate leaders to take action and to show leadership in this space. It rises to more than 2/3 for 18 to 34-year-olds, so we know where all of this is going. What is your direct advice now to those leaders to step up and do more than they're doing today?
I'll be really blunt. Do not use Disney as a roadmap for this. They fumbled the ball. Oh, sorry. I just want to be really direct and upfront here. Don't use Disney as a roadmap. I've heard more CEOs say to me, I don't want to be the next Disney. No one wants to be the next Disney. And they fumbled that ball right out of the gate. I'm not a sports person. I might have messed
got it
up.
right.
Okay. And that could have been, we worked with other companies in other states that successfully knocked down bad legislation that did not become an all-out war in the media. So I would say call your civil society partners and work with us, because we're here to do that, and we're here, when you look good, we look good. Like, this is a partnership, so.
Justin.
There's an expectation for business to act and speak out on these issues. And as you saw, that expectation is particularly high with your Gen Z workforce. So that's just going to keep increasing. Let me say this, though, to give folks some comfort. I do feel a real difference in the temperature this year, not just because it's winter and the last time we were here, it was spring, but something else has chilled, which is companies are feeling a little more scared to speak out, make pronouncements. Let me now give you a little bit of safety. There's a lot of ways you can be an ally to us that isn't just about sending out a tweet. There are ways that you can really engage to help the community. Let me give you an example that's incredibly relevant to World Economic Forum. Multinational companies, major companies, who have people on the ground who have interests in one of the sadly many companies, in one of the many countries that criminalize LGBTQ folks. Someone like me could be killed in more than 50 countries right now. When you're doing operations in those countries, quiet diplomacy, being able to have closed-door meetings, there's also safety in numbers, organized through organizations like GLAAD, HRC, so many of the incredible organizations on the ground. We really need your help. And look, I would love your public help, but there are lots of things that you can do in the background as well that would be so helpful in your allyship.
Now, Jay, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. You're 20 years into your Corporate Equality Index now. Can you explain some of the most important trends? So things you want people to do more of, areas of concern, and then some of the changes that you've been making to how you score companies on the index so that everyone knows where they stand when you come looking.
Yeah, so for 20 years we've worked with companies, the biggest companies in the United States, on LGBTQ inclusive practices and policies that they can implement in their workforce to make things better for LGBTQ workers. I'll just give you a couple of examples of that, and as a trans man, I'm especially proud of what we've done to really pave the way on more trans inclusion long before visibility for the community was as high as it is today. We've got a long way to go, but when we started the index back in 2002, not a single company in the U.S. offered trans-inclusive health benefits, right? We required folks to have non-discrimination policies that covered both sexual orientation and gender identity to earn that first 100% on the index. Back in 2002, only 13 companies got 100%. When we required companies to start adding inclusive health insurance, the number of companies that started to implement those policies grew immensely. Today, we have 1,200 major companies in the U.S. who work with us on this index every year who participate on the index, and 800 of those companies are including not just one policy that's a trans-inclusive healthcare benefit, but multiple. All of their policies have this benefit. Now, that's so important, right? But there's more to do. So we constantly, are looking at whether the baseline is high enough, and so we have just implemented a new set of changes in the criteria. So we're looking at, with regard to trans inclusion, gender transition benefits, being more explicit about the trans-inclusive benefits that are being offered, being more clear with your employees about how they access aid if there are challenges that they face in receiving the care. We're also looking at family formation for LGBTQ couples broadly. And another big issue that we talked about a lot is self-ID, and making sure that companies are actually collecting employment data about their LGBTQ workers. all of this stuff is stuff that obviously is critically important inside the company. And because of this work with corporate America, we are also working with them as Sarah Kate and GLAAD are in making sure that they are advocating for their workers in the public sphere, right? So they have these benefits, but what good are the benefits if the governor of their state is then going to deny them that care, right? So we do an extensive amount of work with them and have a huge political arm of our organization that is on the ground in these battles. State legislation right now in the U.S. is particularly challenging, and it's not just, as you said earlier, not just a U.S. phenomenon. It's a U.K. phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon, and what corporate America does will really impact us globally.
Thank you, thank you. Kavitha, Deloitte, like Boston Consulting Group, it's a huge global organization. I wanted to get a sense from you on how your employees have shaped your policies for LGBTQIQ plus communities. You know, I know at POLITICO, we've helped reshape how we address trans issues. That was employee action. When Black Lives Matter really kicked up in 2020, we made sure that as a nonpartisan news organization, we were allowed to advocate for our families and for the safety of our communities, and that was not a nonpartisan, that was not seen as a partisan issue. So how is it working at Deloitte?
So, is it on? It's on, sorry. Couple of things that I'll add, maybe before I even answer the question, which I will, I promise, is this concept of an ally, and I'm very big on the word ally, and we're at Deloitte, we actually declared 2022 and 2023 as the year of allyship. And I will tell you, the construct, though, is so important because allyship, a lot of people are comfortable in the do no harm quadrant, which is I'm a good person, I don't create any harm, and therefore I will stay here. Well, that's not allyship. Allyship is a verb, it's an action, and the ability to move out of that quadrant of do no harm to really use your social, political power and share power with others for action is super important. And that's a shift we have been trying to achieve culturally, right? Like you have to act, you have to use your power as an organization, as an individual, and that's what makes allyship effective. So I really think about that a lot. When I think about the question you asked, we are very professional-led. So our LGBTQIA community doesn't just simply help, but they lead. We're professional-led, right? Whether it's internal or external policies. And I will tell you, it takes significant effort to listen and to understand what they need. You have to drive based on need. And at Deloitte, we've done quite a few things specifically, and both Jay and I were having this discussion yesterday, but I'll hit on a couple of things specifically. First of all, the Corporate Equality Index, we've scored 100% for 16 years straight. So we're really proud of that. But what I'm proud of, not that we've scored 100%, it's the index has evolved, and it is pushing you to be better. And when you are being pushed to be better, it helps significantly such that the bar keeps raising up. The second thing I'll say is it's important to also be very, very clear what you stand for. So at the US, the Respect for Marriage Act is something we signed. We were very clear that that's a position we're taking, and it was important for our people. But then internally, from a policy perspective, there's small things and big things we do. This might seem really small, but it really matters. Pronouns in signatures, pronouns on badges, and I actually don't think I said, I use she, her pronouns. It's important to say these things out loud, right? Looking at benefits, and not just benefits that are very inclusive, and Jay hit on those, so I won't repeat it. We do apply all those, especially for our transgender community, gender affirming care, but more importantly, having concierge services to help people actually navigate. This is such an important, hard topic, and the navigation is almost as important as having the benefits, right? So that's something that is employee-led in our organization, and we think really hard about that specifically. So I'll tell you, it is the continuous listening, understanding, and applying. But I'll also tell you another movement. We have 400,000 people across the globe, and it is amazing to see Gen Z expectations, and they are very much driving the agenda. What is also beautiful is the parents, people who are parents, are really paying attention and are rising as allies. And that is beautiful to see as well, because it's happening in your homes. You really understand it in the workplace. So I'll pause there and let you go.
The perfect jumping off point, but Justin, you look like you want to jump in. No, great. So Nadia, I really wanted to drill in with you this Gen Z point. So 1 in 5 of this generation identifies as a member of our communities. That's obviously a sea change in how people are willing to express themselves, how they're able to live their lives. What does that mean for how you shape your policies and your day-to-day work environment? And then also, here's a bit of a hard one. Not everyone's on the same page, not everyone knows how to keep up. So how do you work with that sea change, but bring everyone in the organization along with it?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we're talking about that today, and thanks for the great data, Edelman and GLAAD, that proves the point that it's a population that we can't just ignore. They're not just our children, they're not just potential customers, they're our workforce. I mean, they are making up a substantial part of our workforce, and I think that plays out if you go underneath the surface in a few ways. And I'll give you the sort of BCG examples, but also more broadly what we're seeing. So firstly, it means that inclusive policies, the ones that have just been described, are no longer nice to have. They are must-haves. They are table stakes, actually. And the data really proves, and we've done our own research on organizations whose leadership really advocates for inclusive policies, but also shapes the agenda externally on topics, have significantly higher retention. So and by the way, the people that you want to retain, so the most ambitious ones, the younger ones, and the diverse ones. So creating a culture of inclusion actually is step one, and something that we have made sure that's been part of our sort of DNA for many. Actually, our year is the year of inclusion, so there you go. Another thing that's interesting about Gen Z or Gen Z, I live in the UK, is the intersectionality point. So I think there's much more appreciation at around multiple facets of identity when you talk to a Gen Zer or Gen Zer, and how actually they don't want to be conformed to, I am just part of one group or one identity. And I think that plays out then in terms of an organization's setup and how they think about ERGs and how they think about policies, to take a much more segment of one approach and think about actually not saying this is what we're doing for the LGBT community, but this is what we're doing for this individual who needs to navigate, as you were saying, the not just the sort of policies and benefits, but also career paths that might be relevant or applicable for them. And then the third thing that I would say about Gen Z is that they want and they demand, as we heard, their organizations to not just say that they have an opinion about LGBTQ topics, but also that they do something about it. So the statements and the signatures are good, but really what you talk about, what you show, as it relates to NGOs that you're working with. So we partner, and we're very proud to be a founding partner of PGLE, as well as also a very close colleague of mine founded Give Out, which is a charity based in the UK that helps LGBT community members in countries where it is criminalized. We have many sort of partnerships that spend all of their time thinking about this, that we then as BCG try and give our sort of core business services to as a means of paying back, and also as a means of involving our staff in making the change happen. And I could go on, but there's many ways in which an organization can play to their own core strengths and leverage their business know-how for us as consultants, it's things like, providing thought leadership, doing research. We've done, events and research pieces in countries like Kenya, Thailand, where we sit with, the governments and we show them the data about why it pays off in terms of retention, in terms of just general productivity in a way, and talent attraction and retention to be more inclusive. And it's been eye-opening for those, for those governments. And I think every organization, whether you're direct consumer facing or B2B, can think more thoughtfully around how this can actually be part of your business, which helps serve your customers and your stakeholders, but also makes your people, and Gen Z in particular, feel like they are part of that purpose-led organization.
KAVITHA, jump on in.
I was going to add, thank you, that was great. I will say that the other lens is just the global lens to this conversation, super important. We all are on an acceptance curve that's different based on the cultural heritages, the place where every country is different, and recognizing that as global institutions has been super important. I'm born and raised in India, but I live in the US. I've lived there for 30 years. A very simple act this last, very similar to what you talked about, Sarah, is we lit up our buildings in Hyderabad and with the pride flag, and it was just beautiful, but it was so symbolic, because to do that in India and to do it in a country that I will tell you I was raised in, it just took a minute to understand the impact of that. Versus in the US, we've done it multiple times, and yes, the symbolism exists, but it's more expected. But here it was important. So really, as organizations, understanding the global nuances is super important as well.
I want to drill into that now. So like zooming out to that global level, let's think about our convening power and our leverage. We do this in climate change already. People are talking about scope 3 emissions. We've got supply chain legislation coming in about making sure there aren't human rights abuses in sweatshops and other production sites. So we have this ability to think across our global footprint. How can we use that thought and apply it to our communities to stop human rights abuses, Sarah Kate?
Well, I'd love to jump in here. So we have been convening at WEF a decriminalization team to tackle these tough issues. So we're bringing together government, civil society, and corporates. We did it in May, and we produced a white paper with an action plan on how to advance this. So there's 67 countries where it's still criminalized. And what Justin was talking about is really important. Soft diplomacy and using behind-the-scenes leverage, we really think that we can start tackling these issues globally, and it's different. The stakes are different. And so when we're talking about, when you look at the countries that it's still criminalized in, they fall into more or less two buckets. Some are Muslim, half are Muslim, half are Christian. And so you have to approach them differently, and what the goal is to move that forward, like a building lit up in India, in Hyderabad, in Rainbow, is a huge step forward. And I don't think we should diminish that, and we can't just accept it at the same time. Those two things can exist. So I ask anyone who's interested in decriminalization to please speak to me afterwards. We'd love for you to join this conversation with us. And Justin's going to jump in.
No, what comes to my mind is the barrier for business to act on these issues. And Ryan, when you talk about issues like climate, and if you look at other DEI issues, I think there's a major gap that we just need to say out loud right now. There are not a lot of LGBTQ people in C-suites, or on boards of directors, or in the casual kitchen cabinet of advisors that CEOs have, and that is a major problem. Representation when these decisions are being made is essential, but then there's another element to it as well. I think part of the reason that CEOs and other executives aren't speaking out on these issues is they're uncomfortable. They're scared of saying the wrong thing. They're scared of, am I supposed to say LGBTQ? What are the words I'm supposed to use? So instead they say nothing. Well, sorry, CEO or executive, educate yourself. Do the work. If you don't have LGBTQ folks in your board of directors as one of your advisors, make some. Bring some people in to have those conversations with you. Practice saying these words yourself. Like, really do the work, and then you're much more equipped to be an ally.
I was going to only add that I think you're hitting on the point of accountability in this space just as much as we're reporting on what is the racial and ethnic diversity of our board or our management teams. We have to get comfortable reporting on what is the LGBTQIA makeup of the teams. And, you know, I will tell you that progress is important because representation matters, and representation matters in all places where decisions are made. And I think that's the key point that you're saying, Justin, and I really just echo that. And the way to do that is to follow similar. We've started this with a few different groups and cohorts. How do you continue to extend it, especially as you have critical mass of representation in your workforce?
Nadia.
Can I just add one more thing, which is, I think the reason that now you have this sort of galvanization around climate and sustainability, for example, is because the business case is super clear now. So before, it was the good thing to do. We should recycle, we should save the oceans, we should. Then it became clear, no, there is a business rationale, there is an economic rationale, whether that's around, just general saving your country's economy, or if you're a particular industry or company, actually progressing into the next generation of products and services. I think for DE&I, we really need to up the ante on making it super clear that this makes sense. This makes business sense. It's about your people. Human capital is so important. It's the most important thing, frankly, in businesses moving forward. And I'm a tech and digital person, and I'll still say that. And I think that making it really clear in these type of forums that those numbers that you shared earlier, the stories that we've heard of everyday situations of senior people as well as sort of talented, more junior people who say, I'm out. This is not an organization I want to be with, and how that then plays out in terms of that organization's likelihood of succeeding in the future. So I think there is something to be said about we making sure that the messaging has the sort of real business rationale and supporting evidence underneath it.
Jay.
Yeah, I mean, so we've been talking a lot here about how future-proofing your business is about making sure you understand this, right? Like, you cannot underestimate. In the U.S., I think 40% of the workforce by 2030 is going to be Gen Z or millennial. Mm-hmm. That is not just very LGBTQ, but it's also extremely allied. And you saw from the Edelman and GLAAD research what their expectations are of companies. So if you're a CEO who's not comfortable using terms like LGBTQ yet, that is a business decision that is going to impact your company. So you can't have a false dichotomy between business decisions and how you think of this. And I think, there are many different ways to come at this. Some of it's quiet diplomacy, which is extremely important. Some of it's also looking at what success models we've had elsewhere. In Mexico, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, we have CEI-like products, Corporate Equality Index-like products that are called Equidad products that work within companies to make sure that those environments are safe for workers that then will have impact externally for the workforce. And then we were talking yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, about sort of, the other levers of business power. Companies who are sponsoring the Olympics, who are sponsoring the World Cup, that is a place where companies can wield their influence. So there are a lot of different ways, creative ways. We want to be partners. We want to make it easy for you to use the word LGBTQ, but you gotta get sort of over the hump of thinking that this is a choice to sort of be silent on, because it's going to impact your bottom line if it isn't already.
Let's alight on that Qatar World Cup example for a moment. So that we drove a really interesting conversation for a few weeks there around these issues. But I wonder, thinking of all these creative campaigning methods, how do we keep that conversation going? Not just in Qatar, but in sort of other similar countries, both in the region or with similar perspectives around the world. How do we not make it just a one-off or a thing that happens every 4 years, but an ongoing conversation in those spaces? Who wants to take a crack at that?
Well, I mean, I think this is part of it. I mean, we have to get more visibility on the world stage around LGBTQI issues. And so, you know, this has been, I'm very appreciative of us getting this opportunity and all the work that went into this, but we've got to keep this on the front burner and keep it very visible. Sarah Kate and I were talking about, like, it seems like every 4 years something like this happens, and it's like, if that sustained persistence is just not happening, it can fall back. And to Justin's point, if we don't have representation where those decisions are being made, it's going to keep happening. So we got to keep our foot on the gas, so to speak, I think.
I probably would add an "and" to this conversation. It's not an "or" by any means, but we're deeply focused on the topic of equity. And equity to me, equity in design, equity in thinking, and to make things sustainable versus waves of things that come and go, you have to be at the front of the thinking in design, right? Whether you're designing policies, whether you're designing net new constructs in how you do business, really thinking about the equity imperative, to me, changes the conversation because it makes it sustainable. I'll tell you, we are taking every single business process back to Nadia's point on it's a business imperative, you know, whether it's supplier diversity or whether it's talent performance management, really taking the equity lens to it has driven a different conversation because it makes it more sustainable. It has to become part of who you are. It always cannot be this additional conversation or additional campaign. And that shift, I think, is important to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'll say, just when something does make the news, don't see it as, oh no, this is a PR moment, what are we going to say about it? Actually see it as a really good opportunity to create a conversation. So we have an initiative at BCG called Authentic Conversations, and it's sort of small group settings where people can sort of talk about, you know, openly from their starting point, whether that be cultural identity, et cetera, how a certain topic relates to them. And, you know, it doesn't leave those, you know, that Zoom room, but the fact that, you know, we can take something that's in the news and not sort of as a leader stress about it, but actually say, no, this is something we should talk about. Yes, it's okay, it's in the World Cup, we have nothing to do with football or soccer, you know, but actually it does matter. It does matter to our people that we have a voice about it, that we have you know, that we at least create the space to have a conversation about it.
I think that is a critical point, and let me make a humble point about the media here. The news and the headlines, that's an opening for a conversation. It's not the point. Like, media is not the solution. It's the least trusted of those 4 sectors. Like, I do my best to have an authentic conversation with you, but these local conversations in your company, in your family, like that is what matters most. There are people watching online from around the world today. Like, I love all of you here, but we're the really privileged people. It's all of you looking through that camera that are the ones we really need to be talking to. Justin.
Yeah, no, well, you talk about local communities, and look, we've all been up here talking about the global impact that we can all have. A lot of us are US-based multinationals, so I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that in our own communities, in our own cities and states right now, our trans lovers, brothers, sisters, friends are being murdered, legislated against, demagogued. Any US-based company can help with this. What you do in your local community is critical. Talk to your local legislators, talk to people of influence in your communities, tell them that this will not stand. Again, we're not necessarily asking for you to send a tweet, but think of the influence you have in the communities where you're headquartered, where you have thousands of employees. We desperately need your help on this right now.
Can I just add on that? I first appreciate the allyship there, you know, I want to just address head on, I think, this silence around trans issues. You know, I think there is a belief that we might just go away. And I want to let folks know that the cat's out of the bag. And, you know, when we started the work that we do with corporate America, you know, actually, I think GLAAD had the first study that actually asked about folks who personally know somebody trans outside of the LGBTQ umbrella. And back in 2008, when you all did that study, I think it was 8%, right? When we started this work, it was very low. Today, 4 in 10 people know somebody trans or non-binary. And the younger generations are increasingly out as, you know, having a gender identity that's not cisgender. This is, you know, as more possibility models are there for trans and non-binary youth, the numbers are just going to continue to increase. We're not recruiting. It's the same phenomenon that happened with LGBT people once visibility was possible, and workplaces have made a huge difference on that, and they will continue to do that. So companies who choose to stay silent on this are making a business decision that's going to impact their workers and their future workers. And there are so many parents of trans kids inside companies today who really need your help. Think about going to work every day, trying to focus on your job, and then wondering if, you know, Child Protective Services is going to come pick up your family and your kid from school while you're at work, right? That is tough. That is hard for me even to sort of verbalize here. Imagine sort of having that on your shoulders every day at work, which is what many families in Texas and the United States are grappling with. Again, this is unfortunately something that we see starting a lot in the U.S. and in the U.K. And unfortunately, we are worried about what that can mean globally. So companies really do have an active role to play here.
Mm-hmm. It's that idea that not choosing is also a choice. Like you are choosing.
I want to build on what Jay is saying. I think also so much of this fear-mongering is coming from so many people don't know someone who's trans, even though it's growing. So what's being put in this space, in this void, is all these fearful ideas. So please have us as civil society into your companies. Jay is trans. We have trans folks on our team who come in and talk to you about what the trans experience is. What does it mean to be gender nonconforming? What does it mean to be trans? What is all of it about? And once you're educated, it completely changes hearts and minds. So you have 400,000 people, did you say? That's 400,000 advocates and allies, right? And that's about making yours, you know, who knows how many are out, you might, at your current level. But you bring this in and it creates a safer space so more people can be who they are and more people understand the community. So much about this is just understanding and connecting. It's human, and it always comes down to that. We can talk about all the you know, bottom lines we want to, but at the end of the day, it's about knowing each other and connecting with each other.
Such an important point. We're down to our last 5 minutes. I want to role model that one of the things I wish happened more at WEF is a broader conversation. So maybe I'm going to see if there's a question in the audience, and we'll bring the mic over to you. Has anyone got a question for our panelists? Yes, over here. I think it's Camille. Is that right? No. Yes, right. Okay.
First of all, thanks a lot for a great debate. I really appreciate that. And I'm Camilla Sylvester. I'm from Novo Nordisk, a global pharma company. And I really want to be a stronger and a better ally. So I have a very practical question also to your point, Justin, that we've run a few lean-in circles with, you know, smaller number of people to try to listen and learn and get, you know, so how can I be the best possible ally? But I'd like to have your sort of practical best advice as to how can we, you know, as executives in big companies, inform ourselves a lot better to be stronger allies. So very practical. Sorry about that, but you know, we are completely with you on, you know, why we need to do this. I think that's not a question anymore, but now it's more about how do we do it in the best way. But thanks a lot for your dialogue.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just thank you for being here. Is a good first start. I really appreciate that, and I think if more folks were here, that would have a ripple effect. most companies have ERGs, employee resource groups, that do phenomenal work to do internal education, and I would say that's definitely a good place to start. And then, you know, understanding the communities in areas where you serve. There's amazing community-based organizations doing direct service work all across the globe, and that's a great place to, you know, roll up your sleeves, volunteer, get involved. That can give you a lot more insight into the day-to-day realities that LGBTQ folks are facing in your communities.
I would actually offer up HRC in this, because Deloitte's executive actually spent 2 hours with HRC just in a conversation of learning and education. I will tell you, it's in the getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Part of the conversation. It was very educational, because you have a lot of people with misinformation, lack of information, and executives struggle with where to go because they never want, there's a cancel culture, right, that exists. So I would highly recommend taking trusted partners and spending time, and we did it as an executive team, and it was the best thing we have done. So that's an
Thank you for the plug. Yeah, I mean, seriously, our workplace team does this every day, and we are more than happy to continue doing this and doing sort of private briefings that get folks a little more comfortable with the issue, right?
I'm going to throw in three top tips, and this is based on kind of our research on what are the greatest drivers of inclusion. And actually, our study, we just launched it this week, says that 2/3 of the feelings of inclusion come from leadership behavior. So actually, in a position of leadership, you have a huge opportunity to be a sort of exponential ally, so to speak, by firstly making commitments. So, and probably in consultation with, you know, external experts around what would make sense for your organization. Second of all, actually equipping your direct line managers with the understanding of what it means to create safe spaces in their teams. I think that you know, it's not enough to just say, be inclusive, be respectful, you know, like actually what are sort of the things that make sense? And there's lots of resources, HRC, WEF, PGLE, et cetera, that can provide. And then the third sort of tactical thing I would say is mentorship programs make a big difference. And going back to a comment I made earlier around segment of one approach, like I think at the end of the day, if you do focus groups and you can kind of extrapolate a little bit from it around, you know, what matters to your people or to customers or stakeholders, depending on your community, it helps. But actually, if you're thinking about your workforce, and being an ally to them, setting up a way in which they have that one-on-one mechanism of support, I think would be a huge step forward.
Wonderful. We're down to our final minute. Sarah Kate, I'll leave the final thought with you.
I would just say, thank you for that wonderful question. Thank you for this panel. At GLAAD, we have the GLAAD Media Institute, which trains folks across, work with 173 companies or something like that. And we go into the executive suite just like that, because we understand you need to be comfortable and you need to understand the issues, and you need a space where you can actually ask the questions that are burning that might not be appropriate or feel appropriate, but are respectful. And if you come to our community with respect and an open heart, we are here to help build that. And so I would say this forum is about collaboration, or this year is about collaboration. It's about civil society working with corporates and working with governments to move governments forward. So thank you for being here, and we're here to help you move that forward.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, the beginning.
Right.